inexperienced hikers. One frozen mountain, and a mystery so disturbing, even the Soviet government couldn't explain it. In February 1959, rescuers discovered a tent on a remote mountainside in Russia. It had been cut open from the inside. The hikers had fled into the snow, barefoot, half-dressed. Some of their bodies were later found with crushed ribs, shattered skulls, and one missing her tongue. And the official explanation? An unknown compelling force. But the deeper investigators looked, the stranger the story became. Because the evidence suggests those hikers weren't just running from the cold, they were running from something else. And what that might have been still confuses researchers today. The story begins with 9 young explorers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. They were not amateurs. These hikers were some of the most experienced winter adventurers in the Soviet Union. Their expedition leader was Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student. Friends described him as calm, organized, and extremely capable in harsh environments. He had led multiple expeditions before, and this trip was meant to be his most ambitious. Their goal was to cross the northern Ural Mountains during winter, one of the most difficult hiking challenges in the country. The landscape is beautiful but forbidding, with deep snow and harsh lighting. If they succeeded, they would earn the highest level of Soviet hiking certification. But the location they chose had a reputation locals had whispered about for generations. A particularly ominous mountain peak rising against a dark sky. The mountain was called Kholat Syakhl. Translated from the language of the indigenous Mansi people, it means the mountain of the dead. Now, names like that usually come from folklore, but the Mansi rarely visited the area. They believed something about that mountain was wrong. And months later, investigators would begin to wonder if those legends were warning signs. Because something happened on that slope that no one has ever fully explained. Before they vanished, the hikers carefully documented their expedition. They kept diaries, they took photographs, and those records provide a rare glimpse into their final days. At first, everything looked normal. The group joked with each other. They built shelters in deep snow. They navigated across the frozen landscape using skis and compasses. But one photograph has puzzled investigators for decades. In the distance, a dark figure appears, standing alone on a ridge, tall, almost human, but far too distant to clearly identify. Some believe it was simply another hiker. Others think it could be a trick of the camera. And only hours after this image was captured, something happened inside their tent that caused 9 experienced survivalists to do something completely irrational. They cut their way out of their shelter and run into a blizzard. On February 1st, 1959, the hikers set up their tent on the exposed slope of the mountain. It was not the safest location. Most experienced hikers would have descended into the forest for protection from wind. But for unknown reasons, the group chose to camp directly on the slope. That night, the temperature dropped below -30°C. Winds swept across the mountain. Visibility was almost zero. At some point in the night, something forced the hikers to leave their tent. But they didn't leave normally. They cut their way out from inside, leaving behind boots, leaving behind coats, leaving behind food, and they ran into the darkness. Weeks later, when the hikers failed to return, rescue teams were sent into the mountains. What they discovered shocked everyone. The tent still standing, partially buried in snow. Inside were their boots, their coats, their equipment, everything they would need to survive. But the tent had been slashed open from the inside, meaning the hikers didn't calmly exit their shelter. They escaped it. Investigators then noticed something even stranger. Footprints, 9 sets of them, leading away from the tent. Some barefoot, some wearing only socks, all heading downhill into the forest. But the footprints revealed something disturbing. They were not running, they were walking. The first 2 bodies were discovered beneath a massive cedar tree. Lying there, barefoot, their skin showed signs of severe hypothermia. The injuries are severe and tell a story of panic and desperation. But their hands told a different story. Their fingers were shredded, skin torn, as if they had desperately climbed the tree. Looking up at the cedar tree showing broken branches, the damage suggests someone climbed high into the tree with great effort. Broken branches were found 5 meters above the ground, meaning someone had climbed high into the tree, possibly to see something, or escape something. Nearby investigators found the remains of a small fire, barely capable of warming anyone in the brutal cold. And then search teams discovered 3 more bodies between the cedar tree and the tent. These hikers appeared to be trying to return. One collapsed first, then another, all within a few hundred meters of safety of their tents. But the last 4 hikers were still missing, and when they were finally found months later, the mystery became far darker.
Chapter 8. The most disturbing.
The final 4 bodies were discovered in a nearby ravine, beneath several meters of snow. Their injuries were severe, but strangely, they had almost no external wounds. Forensic examination scenes showing the severe internal injuries, crushed skull, broken ribs. The presentation is clinical but disturbing, emphasizing the mysterious nature of the trauma. One hiker had a crushed skull. Another had multiple broken ribs. The force required to cause these injuries was enormous. Investigators later compared it to the impact of a car crash. But there were no vehicles, no weapons, no signs of violence. And then came the detail that shocked investigators. One of the hikers, Lyudmila Dubanina, was missing her tongue and parts of her face. Some believe animals scavenged the remains, but others argue the injuries didn't match typical wildlife patterns. And then investigators discovered something even stranger. Several pieces of clothing tested positive for radiation, which raised a terrifying possibility. Had the hikers accidentally witnessed something they weren't supposed to see? But before investigators could answer that question, witnesses reported seeing strange glowing lights in the sky the same night those hikers died. And those lights may be the most unsettling clue in the entire case. Residents and military personnel reported seeing orange glowing spheres floating above the mountains. They moved silently, hovered, then disappeared. Some witnesses believed they were secret military weapons. Others believed they were something far stranger. Because sightings of unexplained lights have been reported in the Ural Mountains for decades. If the hikers saw those lights, it might explain why they left the tent. But it still doesn't explain the injuries, which is why the Dyatlov Pass Incident remains one of the most disturbing, unsolved mysteries in modern history. More than 60 years later, the Dyatlov Pass mystery remains unsolved. The official Soviet report concluded with one chilling statement. The hikers died because of an unknown compelling force. No explanation, no suspects, just a mystery frozen in time. And somewhere on that mountain, the truth may still be buried beneath the snow. But here's the question. If you were inside that tent, and something scared 9 experienced explorers enough to run barefoot into a blizzard, what would it have to be?